My name is Dr. Shawna Pandya, and I have the honor of being Canada's first named commercial female astronaut. I'm also a physician, an aquanaut, an explorer, and maybe I'll leave it at that. But yeah, every day is a little bit different, and I love what I do.
Oh, that is absolutely fantastic. I can't believe I'm speaking to an astronaut. That is so friggin' cool. But let's go back to childhood. I'd love to hear more about your early years and growing up. What was your family life like? Were you outdoorsy? Were you sporty? Were you into space and the outdoors? Share more about your early years.
All of the above. Those are great questions. And so everything I am today, the more I reflect upon it in adulthood, the fascination, the work ethic, all of that started very, very early. So I have wanted to be an astronaut ever since I was a kid. And I was inspired by Canada's first female astronaut, Dr. Roberta Bondar, going to space. And I was a kid growing up during the 90s and I watched Dr. Bondar go to space. And that was my aha moment that, oh my gosh, Canadian women and girls can go to space. So I realized that's what I wanted to do. And when you're a kid, you tend to oversimplify. So I was like, she's Canadian, I'm Canadian, she's a girl guide, I'm a girl guide, or she was a girl guide, I'm a girl guide, she's a girl, I'm a girl. All right, let's do this. So let me just follow in her footsteps. And I realized that Dr. Bondar is a physician, a neuroscientist, and an astronaut. So I thought, I'm going to go study neuroscience, be a physician, and then be an astronaut. And, that was the trajectory for the longest time. I had my neuroscience degree and did research in neuroscience. And then I became a physician. And as of June 2024, I have been assigned to a research suborbital spaceflight with Virgin Galactic through my research institute at the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. So this really is the culmination of a lifelong dream and a lifelong journey. And the other two parts of my childhood that really have helped get me to where I want to be were, as you alluded to, the outdoorsiness. My parents, they don't consider themselves adventurous, but when you look at them and their life's trajectory, they packed up everything they owned in two suitcases and moved over from India to Canada in the 80s and started a whole new life together in rural Canada in the dead of winter, which was a huge change. And there was no internet back then. There were no cell phones. It was the era of landlines and long distance calls. And so I think that requires a certain spirit of adventure for sure. And they kind of built in this outdoorsiness into us, my brother and I, from the very start. They would go camping. They would take us tenting when we were toddlers. And then later on, as I grew up, I did Girl Guides for many, many years. And we did camping. We would take younger girls on camping trips. And then I also did outdoor education throughout junior high. And that involved everything from simple tenting to building lean-tos to building a quinzhee, which is a snow shelter and sleeping in it. So that spirit of adventure and resourcefulness was there from the start. And then the final part of it is the work ethic, which I inherited from my parents. And so I like to say I don't just work immigrant hard, but I work Pandya hard because my parents, for them, to build a new life in a new country and to be successful, you just have to work hard. You have to show up. You have to stick to it. And my brother and I grew up thinking that the normal workday is from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. because that's what we saw my dad and mom do. My dad's a physiotherapist. He was trained in India. He was starting a brand new practice in Canada, and my mom was helping set up his practice. And so it required a lot of long hours. But for us, we just thought that was normal. And so all of that, when I look at where I'm at today, that adventurousness, that work ethic, that ambition and believing that not even the sky is the limit, all of that was instrumental into landing me on my current trajectory.
Going back to when, you were inspired by Dr. Rebecca and having that dream thinking, yes, okay, this is what I need to do to end up as an astronaut. Was this something that you talked about and shared quite openly, or was this more of like a hidden desire and goal that you kept very much to yourself?
I definitely did not keep it a secret. Definitely not. As a kid, you just assume everyone's cheering you on. Like why wouldn't anyone want to support this amazing dream? So all of my homework assignments through junior high were all around space. Every book I checked out from the library had to do with astronomy and astrophysics. And when we would go on camping trips, I would be obsessed with the night sky, and we would go to souvenir shops, and there would be those little pocket astronomy guides, or there would be headlines on USA Today about microbial life found on Mars, and I would just beg them to buy it. And I have this one memory. We took a family trip to Australia when I was 12, and you're in your tour groups and you're meeting people of all ages. And I just remember being so obsessed with the southern night sky, which we didn't have access to in the northern hemisphere. So then I started pointing out the constellations and the Southern Cross. And the guy from our group, he was in his 20s. He's like, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "I want to be an astronaut." And he was just so shocked that I was just so confident about it that I wondered if there was something lost in translation, that I accidentally said something offensive, because he was just so taken aback. But it was just there. That passion was there. And it's sort of like, look, in retrospect, it all worked out. But, having endured the years and the decades, you do not know whether it's going to work out for you or not. You don't know where you're going to end up. And so you have to love the grind. You have to love the journey every step of the way.
Did anyone try and sort of talk you out of it, or almost have that reality talk with you, as in, look, this is a really nice dream, but statistically, realistically, there's not that many women going to space. There's not that many humans going to space. How did you handle that then? When people are trying to crush your dream, like, how did you keep so mentally strong that you were like, nope?
Yeah, when I was 12, I had a bit of an academic rival, and she just wasn't very nice to me at all. And any dig she could take at me, she would. And I was very vocal. I was, vocal about wanting to be an astronaut, and at the time I wanted to be a director at NASA. And she said something like, "Oh, well, you have to be very smart to be a director at NASA." I was like, "But I have the top grades in the class." She's like, "Well, you have to be smarter than that." And I just remember thinking, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. Like you can see, even as a kid, you realize that, okay, there's people who have your best interests at heart, and there's people who do not. And this clearly was not one of them. And then, for people whose opinions perhaps that I cared a little bit more about, from the family perspective, your parents want to see that you also have a realistic dream. And then coming from realistic career ambitions, and coming from an East Indian background, your parents very much will applaud you when you decide you want to go into medicine, for example. The astronaut part, they're maybe less sure about, but since the roadmap included medicine, they weren't too fussed about it. But for, anytime there was a digression, they would say, well, keep in mind that the end goal is medicine." And so one example of that is, after doing my undergraduate degree in neuroscience, I applied to medical school. And then I realized that, well, this is an extremely competitive endeavor, and I need a backup plan, that if I don't get into medical school, I am doing something that is still advancing my career, that I will be equally happy investing in. And so I'd heard of this place called the International Space University in Strasbourg, France. And it sounded like Starfleet Academy, and it is. And basically, they had a master's program where you learned about all things space. And I thought, this sounds right up my alley. And so I applied. I applied to medical school. To my shock, I got into both the master's program and to med school. And then I spent many, many nights agonizing about, what do I do? And then I had this kind of aha moment, like, I'm doing this all for space. Like, it would be foolish not to go to the space university. And so I asked my medical school for a deferral, and to my surprise, they granted it, which in retrospect, I realized that they really were judicious about where and when they granted deferrals. And so that was also a lesson in learning to find the best and most supportive environments. And so off I went to the International Space University, and that was the beginning of realizing that people actually make careers out of space and space medicine, and that's a whole field of study. And I was lucky enough to do my internship at the European Space Agency's European Astronaut Center, where I got to make a meaningful contribution to space medicine. And so there are ways, there are people who are going to try to dissuade you, who are going to try to encourage you. And, to the earlier point of this story, when I started to diverge a little bit from medicine, my mom's like, "You're going to come back and do medical school, right?" So, there was kind of always this gentle but loving but firm kind of guidance of, hey, you're going to do medicine, right? So you kind of have to take all of the critiques along the way. You have to consider them in terms of what your values and end goal are. You have to consider the source for sure. And then it's up to you to decide to give that weight and credence or to let it wash past you like a wave. And that's been something that's been really important to this day because, you know, the criticism will never stop. It's how you handle it that can change.
I mean, you talked about work ethic earlier and how your parents, they've worked so hard from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's what you consider sort of the working day. How do you ensure that you don't get burnout and that you have balance in your life when when you're going after these big dreams, which do take huge amounts of work and ethic, and you've got to give them everything. How have you managed to maintain that balance?
That's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it because it's actually become really relevant recently. Because even as I'm pursuing this trajectory as a research astronaut, I'm still maintaining my clinical hours. I cover rural emergency rooms every weekend from 5 p.m. Friday to 8 a.m. Monday. And then I come back and do the research and exploration and astronautics work on the weekdays. And so it is definitely a work life balance. It's not one that's for everyone. But for me, the reason I love it and the reason I don't burn out is several fold. So first of all, I know my values and I am living my life according to my values. And that includes freedom, curiosity, exploration, and also complete control over my own schedule. So when this becomes too much, I have the choice of stepping away from clinical medicine for a bit and recharging. Whereas if I was contracted to a single hospital on a hospital rotation, I think that risk for burnout would be much higher. I think it's also being surrounded by good people. It's finding fulfillment and loving what I do. And then it's also just getting value from what I do, whether it's space or medicine within the exploration, expedition, and space world. I'm surrounded by the extraordinary teammates who inspire me to be a better version of myself every single day. And then within medicine, yeah, the hours can be insane. And you might find yourself in the hospital from 3 to 6 a.m. and then have to go back right at 9. But if you're in the hospital at 3 a.m., it's because you're there for a reason and someone's life depends on your presence there. It's not because you're there to fill a prescription. And so, if I'm out of bed in the middle of the night, there's a reason for it and there's a meaningful reason. And that recharges me.
Talking about sort of like fitness and health and fitness for being an astronaut. Obviously, only read this, never experienced it, but spending time in space in gravity can affect your bone density and your muscle mass. Is that true? And does that mean that you have to reach a certain muscle mass or that you're doing certain types of training now to prepare yourself for when you're heading up into space? And what does that training look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, the reason space medicine is a field, the reason the words space and medicine belong next to each other in a sentence is because, in a nutshell, space is trying to kill you. And so, when we talk about the challenges of the spaceflight environment, they include what we call the Big Five or the RIDGE framework, which stands for radiation, isolation and confinement, distance from Earth, altered gravity, and environment, which can include everything from altered day night cycles. So, if you're on the International Space Station, with the rate of orbit, you're actually experiencing one sunset or sunrise every 90 minutes. So that's 16 sunrise sunset cycles per 24-hour period. So that can ostensibly interfere with your sleep schedule. And on the moon, you may also have to contend with lunar regolith or dust, which, as we know from the Apollo missions, is a potent skin, respiratory, and eye irritant. So coming back to your question about microgravity, we know that every single bodily system is affected by the microgravity environment. We don't think about it sitting here on Earth, but actually our core muscles and our weight-bearing bones are doing a lot of work keeping us upright against gravity. And when they don't do that, we lose bone density at a rate of 1 to 2% per month. And if we don't have countermeasures, our astronauts will quickly get osteoporotic, which is something that we see in the elderly on Earth, particularly in women, and our muscles lose mass. So for longer duration spaceflight, it becomes really important to both have that good bone and muscle strength before a mission, and then enact daily countermeasures while you're up on station, which consists of 2 hours a day of aerobic and resistive exercise, 6 days a week. So for my own mission profile, which is suborbital, that is a much shorter duration spaceflight profile. So that's a same day mission. So you don't have the same effects and the same physiological consequences and risks to contend with. But for me, physical activity is therapy. It's a way to recharge. It's a way for me to make sure I'm investing in myself. So for me, my own fitness routine includes 2 hours most days. So an hour of cardio and then 30 to 45 minutes of weightlifting and stretching. And for me, it's an internal sensor because the work is never going to stop. It's always going to be there. So it's for me to decide how strict and disciplined I am about recharging and taking time for myself. And of course, there's going to be days when I don't make it to the gym because of the workload, because the emergency room is too busy. And if that's happening too many days in a row, then this internal sensor for me goes off saying, you got to change something up or you're going to burn out. So for me, it's very vital to just stay healthy and at that level where I can perform.
Part of space training that I've read is with learning like diving skills, like doing spending time underwater. Is that right? And how much diving have you had to do?
Yeah. So when you're looking for skills that are translatable, you like to see someone that is operationally good and a good teammate. And so, what we mean by being good in an operational environment, it means that you're in this environment where things are changing rapidly, dynamically on a four-dimensional scale. So, you have your physical environment, but it's changing over time. It can change rapidly. And it may not just be yourself that's affected, but it may also be your teammates. So, you have to keep an eye out for all of that. And so, examples of operational environments, aside from space, are emergency medicine. It can be diving, it can be skydiving, it can be piloting, all of the above. And so, the reason that diving is as well as having aquanaut experience, so having lived in saturation for 24 hours or longer, that's important because it is this closed environment. So we kind of talked about the importance of isolated and confined environments being one of the challenges of spaceflight. And so when you're on an aquanaut crew, I've done 2 aquanaut missions now with the NEPTUNE missions, which stands for Nautical Experiments in Physiology, Technology, and Underwater Exploration. So I've been a part of a crew of 5, so 2 Canadians, 3 Americans, and we've done 2 separate missions over the years in this underwater habitat in the Florida Keys. And we've done 5 and 6 day missions looking at technologies that might help inform mission planning for human spaceflight as well as austere environments or resource limited environments. And we've also looked at physiological studies. And the whole idea is you want to be able to keep your cool in this environment where you may not have the normal resources that you normally would, that you can keep an eye on the environment as it's changing. You're aware of the risks. You can keep your cool, and then you can also work very, very well in a close knit team. And you can look out for both yourself as well as your team members. And that comes back to a bigger principle that we call expeditionary behavior. That you have the wherewithal to look at the mission, look at the health of your team as well as your own health, and then advocate for both what your teammates and yourself need in the context of the mission objectives. So diving, especially, the 2 aquanaut missions I've done have been really, really helpful in informing my spaceflight readiness.
Because, some of the situations that you've been in and that you're going to be going into are what I would definitely call a high stress environment. You may not call it a high stress environment. But with regards for you personally, like handling stress, what are the tips and tricks that you have learned like over the years to help you when you're doing like either emergency medicine or you're in, these underwater situations or, heading off into space? How do you handle that?
Yeah, there's no room for ego. There's no room for I got this when you don't have this. You have to let's fall back to emergency medicine because I think that's a really good analog for everything else. Like when you're in the emergency room, you're aware of where you are and what resources you have at your disposal. And one of the reasons I continue to practice rural emergency medicine is because it really does inform my space medicine research because it is a remote resource limited environment, and you have to think resourcefully, you have to think critically. So you have to be aware of everything that comes in through the door. You have to be aware of when you may be at your limit. And then you have to think in terms of probabilities, in terms of what is the most likely thing, what else could this be, what is the thing I cannot miss, what is the best case scenario, what is the worst case scenario. And that's how you're thinking in terms of the emergency department. And that those are very translatable thinking patterns for spaceflight, for aquanauting, for any of these operational environments. And so to deal with the stress, like you have to also be aware of, when do I need to call for help? How early do I need to do that? Like you need to be aware of that. And I've had, you will definitely have critical patients who walk in through the door. They can't pick and choose whether they come in through a major tertiary level trauma center versus a tiny little rural emergency room where you may have X-ray and lab on call, you have a tiny team of nurses, you may be understaffed, you may be overwhelmed with the sheer amount of patients. And then you also have to learn to work very well in teams. You have to accept feedback because these nurses have seen it all. They will have very good suggestions, and you can't say, well, excuse me, I'm the doctor here. Nobody say anything but me. You also have to have the presence of mind to lead a trauma or resuscitation scenario and make sure people have faith in your leadership. And then you also have to realize that there's an escalating pattern of communication in operational scenarios. And it's really good to be aware of that because that actually can help determine how your team perceives the urgency of the situation. And so this is something that comes from aviation. And this pattern of communication goes question, suggestion, statement, command. So question, suggestion, statement, command. And when we talk about this pattern, it may just be something like the question could be, hey, this patient is triaged at a very low level. Should they be higher? And then this suggestion may be, maybe we should move this patient to a higher acuity room. And then the statement may be, this patient is at risk of a cardiac event. We need to address that. And then the command is, move this patient to the trauma room now. And so the reason it's important to be aware of that pattern of communication is because there's a time and place for everything. Because if I'm coming into the emergency room and issuing commands on a day-to-day basis, we have this saying in medicine that if everything's urgent, nothing's urgent, right? I'm just bossing my teammates around. I'm not taking their own autonomy and critical thinking skills seriously. And they're also going to just get urgency fatigue because they're not going to know what to take seriously if I'm saying, hey, put this patient in this room, make sure you do this, this, and this, and discharge them. And, just no one likes to be having orders barked at when it's not necessary. But on the flip side, if I'm walking into a code situation and someone is clearly flatlined and I'm saying, hey, maybe do you think we should start doing chest compressions? People are going to lose a lot of faith in my ability to clearly command a scenario. And so it's all really important to be aware of what tools you have at your disposal, what resources, what limitations are, what the probabilities are of having different scenarios and what you're going to do in the best and the worst case scenarios. And so all of that lends itself to being able to manage these high risk, high reward, potentially stressful scenarios.
So what is it like, and I don't know how much you're able to answer this question, between sort of now and heading off on your mission in terms of there being a countdown of things that you need to know? I was just thinking, my
Yeah.
knowledge is coming from like the Big Bang Theory when Howard goes into space. Like,
Yeah, there's a lot. And so it is the coolest possible time to be a part of human space flight because once upon a time, the only way to go to space was through a space agency like NASA or the European Space Agency or the Canadian Space Agency. And now, since 2021, we've literally seen companies like Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Axiom take off and take civilians to space. And now we're seeing this branch point where it's sort of like you can go as a tourist, you can go as an explorer, you can go as someone who's won a contest, you can go as an employee of a company, or you can do what we do and go to space for research. And for us, it's very cool to be living in this era of not just do you want to be an astronaut, but what kind of astronaut do you want to be? And so what that means is I have this really cool position at my research institute, the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences, in addition to being a research astronaut, I also now I'm the executive director of our Flight Opportunities Program. So all of the research priorities, the training, curriculum, qualifications, partnerships, all of that falls under my portfolio. So it's been a very busy few years since my flight assignment. We've done everything from training flights as a team. And so when I say we, the only thing better than going to space is going to space with your friends. And I get to fly with my good friends, Kelly Girardi, who was the first research astronaut from our institute, as well as Dr. Nora Patton, will be Ireland's first astronaut. And we have somehow unwittingly become the world's first all-female research astronautics crew, which feels pretty cool to say. And so in the background, we've been doing training zero-G flights together in parabolic flight, which people may know of as the vomit comet. So you're actually not flying any higher than a commercial flight, but you're flying up and down in parabolas, just like you're on a roller coaster and going over these hills. And so when you fall at the same rate as your aircraft, that gives you 18 to 22 seconds of weightlessness at a time. And so when you stack these parabolas, you can practice joint crew operations. You can see how you all move and react together in the microgravity environment. You can practice choreography. You can practice deconfliction with other operations in the cabin. So we've done 6 of those training flights now. And we've also delineated our research priorities, which for this flight are women's health, neuroscience, health technology, as well as the physical sciences. So some of what we'll be doing is building on the research from Kelly's flight from IIS-01, for which I was a lead scientist and the medical lead. And then we also, to help bring the best of science in these areas with us, we held a global call for science last year, and in these priority areas, soliciting additional payloads we might bring with us. And the response was incredible. We had responses from 11 countries over 5 continents, from major research institutions, independent researchers, space agencies. It was really cool. And then in October of last year, we actually started to down select and fly some of these payloads with us in parabolic flight. And so that down select, that practice is ongoing. Research is ongoing. We've had a wonderful research track record, publishing posters, papers, going to conferences. And then the other part of that is the outreach aspect of what we do. This is a very geopolitically complex time, to say the least, but there's always hope in even the most calamitous times. And I think one of the most promising bridges for cooperation, collaboration, peace, and sustainability is science diplomacy. And we've had a presence in 8 countries so far, working with research institutions, embassies, not-for-profits. And for us, using the bridge of what we espouse in terms of research and exploration and discovery, and using that as a bridge to build these relationships is also really important to us. So there's a lot going on in the background in the lead up to our space flight, and there's never a dull moment, but we love every step of the journey.
Do you have any fears or concerns before going up there? And if you do, how do you manage those fears or concerns?
That's a great question. I think it's just like in, medicine, people say, how do you deal with the trauma? How do you deal with the emotional aspects of the situation? And that doesn't play into it at all, because we're there as astronauts with a job to do. Our job is to know our payloads and operations and contingencies inside out and be prepared to act on them. And so we are there in a very, very focused capacity. Suborbital spaceflight is like a performance sport. When we flew Kelly, her checklist was scheduled down to the second, because there was so much to do. Like, we had to put a point on our checklist for her to remember to look out the window because we didn't want her to miss the opportunity. But she was there with a job to do. She had a payload to operate. And when, depending on the results she was seeing in real time, she either had to repeat the experiment or embark upon a contingency scenario. And so we're very aware of the need to be prepared, to be aware of our backup procedures, to be aware of the safety contingencies, to be aware of everything else that may be going on in the cabin and looking out for each other. And so we go into this knowing the vast landscape of everything there is, but we're also there because we've done this. We trust each other as a team, and we're there to perform.
Which experiment are you most excited about doing when you're up there?
Yeah, so we're still in the middle of our down select. So we still have not committed to the final payloads. But what's been really exciting is the amount of women's health that we have pioneered along the way. So we have done a number of firsts in parabolic flight, some of which were just as feasibility studies, which we don't intend on taking with us to suborbital flight, and some of them are precursors for suborbital flight. And so we have looked at very comprehensive studies of the vaginal microbiome and RNA changes in microbes in the vaginal canal after exposure to microgravity and high gravity situations in conjunction with hormonal changes, blood changes. So that is really exciting because when we look at how many women have made it to space, we're making small steps, but we still have a ways to go. So, of the 700 plus people who've been to space, only 14% of those have been women. And so 11, that's still a little bit better than we were doing 2 years ago when it was 11 to 12%, but it also means that there's a lot more study that needs to be done. I was the lead for the study that demonstrated the feasibility of IUD insertion and removal in the microgravity environment, which had never been done before. And that has implications for long duration space flight. So when we look at a Martian mission profile, which can be 3 to 5 years, according to NASA projections, you have to think about everything you're going to bring with you and its shelf life. And so where that becomes important is for menstrual management. And so most menstruating astronauts at this point will opt for oral contraception to suppress their periods so they don't have to worry about their periods in space. But when you do the math for Mars, that ends up being at least 1,100 oral contraceptives per astronaut, which is a lot. And keep in mind, you're very constrained with the mass and volume of things you can bring with you. And then there's been recent studies showing that 64 to 98% of medications can expire over the course of a 3 to 5 year Mars mission. So something like a hormonal IUD for menstrual management becomes a better option for those reasons. But then you also have to be prepared for managing it in mission. So if it falls out, becomes expired, becomes infected, becomes malpositioned, you need to be prepared to remove and replace it. And so conducting that study, in parabolic flight, and then also performing just-in-time training for those of our team members who didn't have medical backgrounds was very, very cool to lead and be a part of. And we're really proud of that study.
Oh, fantastic. It's amazing. I'm going to switch things up now. I've got some quick fire questions for you. So my questions may be quick, but your answers don't have to be. Are you a morning or an evening person?
100% an evening person. It's really funny because my best friend it'll be 30 years in September. She's a morning workout person. So we often joke that my bedtime could be her wake up time. It's not quite that dramatic, but team night owl all the way. That was one of my call signs on one of my Mars simulation missions.
So what time do you normally go to bed?
I travel extensively. There have been times when I've done 7 countries, 4 or 5 continents in 4 weeks. And it's been interesting to note that regardless of where I am, usually around 1 or 2 a.m. Is when I'm heading to bed.
And then what time would you wake up in the morning? What time do you set your alarm?
I try not to schedule early morning meetings unless absolutely necessary. So I try to get my day going around 9 a.m.
Do you know what? I love that. Make the days work for you. If you're not a morning person, don't be a morning person.
Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes when you're traveling like crazy, sometimes your brain says, "Hey, it's 4 or 5 a.m. You're up." And then you're like, "Okay, well, I'm going to the gym then." It's not often that happens, but you just do what your brain says is right in the moment.
I generally ask, like, do you have a favorite movie? So I always want to know what your favorite movie is. And then do you have a favorite space movie?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So growing up, I grew up in the era of Independence Day. I wanted to be Will Smith. I wanted to be the spaceship captain who got the bad guys and saved Earth. That was, I won't tell you how many times I've seen that movie. And then recently I was in New York recording a podcast with colleagues on some important space health work that we're collaborating on. And so one of them realized that I hadn't seen the movie Sunshine. It's a 2007 movie, and that is now up there as one of my favorites. Hidden Figures is also a really good one. So those are top 3 for sure.
What about a book that you've read recently or that has really inspired you?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many. One that I recommend often is Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield's An Astronaut's Guide to Earth. And just, how his mindset got him to space and how it's helped him become the person he is. So that's definitely a classic.
What type of music do you like listening to?
It really depends on what I'm doing. I definitely have a high adrenaline workout playlist. So Linkin Park has forever been my favorite band. And when I'm wanting to do deep work, it'll actually very predictably be the John Wick soundtrack. And I've recently discovered that there's this very, very specific subgenre of a mashup between EDM and classical music, which is also great for doing deep work or when you just, want to get high RPM and just go skipping and just get a really good workout in.
Are you more of a beach person or a mountain person?
I would say mountain. Like, I don't know that people keep saying this word to me that I still don't really understand. They keep saying relax, and I don't know what that means. So, probably mountain.
Favorite food to eat at home and in space?
Oh, that's a good one. I am a sucker for a very well-made thin crust. Keeps better, even better if it's homemade. And then in space, basically whatever will respect the boundaries of the environment. So it has to have a long shelf life, has to have good nutrient and caloric value. Because you're congested in space, your fluids shift upwards. You feel as if you have a cold. So things need to be more flavorful and textured, can't be heavy, like an orange would be a luxury. So honestly, whatever they feed me, that keeps me on the mission, assuming it's a long duration mission.
Favorite bit of training to do, like weightlifting or yoga or high rocks or CrossFit?
Oh, skipping. Like, I love skipping. I love going high RPM skipping. I like looking up skipping influencers on social and seeing what kind of crazy tricks they're doing and then seeing if I can learn some variation of that. It's a way for me on the days when I've spent too much time in meetings or in front of a computer or my phone. You cannot do any of that when you're skipping. You just put the headphones on, you get your high adrenaline, high RPM playlist going, and then you just go.
I love that. Next one could be quite challenging for you, but what do you do for rest and relaxation?
So this one's actually a little bit easy because I am a lifelong bird person. I currently have a 56-gram lovebird. She does not care what I do in life. She does not care how busy my day has been, how chaotic it's been in the hospital, what I've been doing in the astronautics world. She just wants to know that I will care for her, I will love her, I will feed her walnuts because that's her favorite thing in the world. And so having a pet will keep you humble because they do not care what you do in the human world. They want to know that you will love them and give them the best possible life that they trusted you to.
And is she in the room at the moment? I think I've heard her little.
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
she's noise and solar powered. She's in a different room, but she's been very excited by the conversation, but also offended that she's not part of it.
Ah, what's her name?
It's a very nerdy exploration name. Her name is Jules, and the reason for that is she's the same kind of murky green as the lagoon where we did our aquanaut missions at the Jules Undersea Lodge. So when I saw her, she's a rescue, and she needed a name. It was a no-brainer, and she's not a species that's supposed to talk, but she's super smart. She loves learning tricks, so she's learned to say her name, which is really entertaining for us all.
I love that. Do you have a mantra or words that you live by?
Yeah, I've got lots. And you've got this is one of them. One of them, I'll share one from my mom, one from my dad. One from my mom is keep going. So my mom's been this no nonsense person. She is extremely hardworking. She doesn't stop. And, even when you're in your worst moment, she'll say to you, you got to keep moving. You got to keep going. And like, there's been times when growing up, and I'm like, how can you say that? I'm suffering here. And now that I'm an adult, you're like, oh, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's like the old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You just got to start. So that's one I got from my mom. And then one from my dad that I think about often. He says, what's the difference between success and activity? And then he'll say, success is eating tomato soup with a spoon. Activity is eating tomato soup with a fork. And so when I wonder if I'm being as effective as I could be, I think about that.
Yeah, I'm going to have to think about that a little bit as well. And Dr. Shawna, how can people follow along with your journey? Where are you most active on social media? Where can they find out more information?
Yeah, we're very committed as a team to sharing our journey and our work. We all have our own individual social media profiles. So I'm very active across LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Twitter, Facebook. So Dr. Shawna Pandya, MD, some combination of those. So SHAWNA PANDYA. And it'll be pretty obvious there's a headshot of me in my flight suit. So for the longer form stuff, follow me on LinkedIn. For the more insightful essays, those will be on LinkedIn. And then for the fun stuff, come to Instagram and TikTok.
Oh, fantastic. And Dr. Shawna, I'd love to leave you with the opportunity for you to share your final words of advice and wisdom for other women and girls who want to pursue their dreams and passions. And apart from just do it, you can take that in any direction that you would like.
Yeah, absolutely. So people are going to try to tell you what you should and shouldn't do. And my advice is pick what you want to do. Aim to be really, really, really good at it. Aim to become the hardest working person in a room, because a work ethic is free. You can be born with different levels of talent or privilege, but you make your own work ethic. So then work really, 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 really hard to get to where you want to be, and then act like you belong there, because you do. You just need to make space for yourself.
I absolutely love that. Dr. Shawna, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast. This has just been such an incredibly inspiring conversation, and I cannot wait to follow along with your journey and to see you head off into space. Just phenomenal and incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Hey, tribe. I really hope you enjoyed the episode with Dr. Shawna. What an absolute inspiration. Just it's such an incredible role model. I mean, a couple of things really, really stood out for me. Just her talks about, maintaining balance, avoiding that burnout, and living that life which is aligned with her values. I also loved how she talked about how she fits things in. For me, like the skipping one, it sounds so simple, but what a great way to raise your heart rate, keep your cardio fitness up by just having a skipping rope there for you. But there's also great advice and tips as well about how to handle difficult situations, whether that is dealing with criticism. I think that's really, really powerful. And also surrounding yourself by good people and loving what you do. And I think that's also important, by the fact that you are choosing to listen to the Tough Girl podcast, to listen to these incredible women sharing their stories, means that you are filling your mind with this positivity, this motivation, this inspiration, which is fantastic. But also there are practical tips and tricks in every single episode, how you can think differently, how you can tweak things, how you can behave in emergency situations. How do you want to achieve? How are you going to achieve it? What is your goal? How are you going to manage any fears and concerns that you have? How are you going to make sure that you are aware and prepared for things? What movies are you going to watch that inspire you? What books are you going to read that are going to inspire you? What music are you going to listen to that's going to inspire you? How are you going to rest and relax? Because that is important as well. Having mantras and words that you live by, whether it's you've got this, keep going, keep moving. I've just recently got a new pair of AirPods because my last AirPods have disintegrated or died a very sad death, but I got them engraved, and the words that I put on my AirPods were do the work. Do full stop, the full stop, work full stop, because that is to remind me that I need to show up every day, whether it's to do with building Tough Girl challenges, whether it is to do with my training, whether it's to do with putting out podcast episodes. I have to do the work. I have to show up. So that's my sort of mantra at the moment is do the work. What's your mantra? What are the words that you are trying to live your life by? Worth having a little think about it. If you're looking for more inspiration, then please do go and visit toughgirlchallenges.com. We've got an amazing website. There is a search function bar. You can use the search function to search about different adventures and challenges that I've done, but also there's a lot of information about other women. The podcast has been going since 2015. There is over 800 episodes. There is a dedicated resources section. So whether you are interested in ocean rowing, polar exploration, triathlon, becoming a swimmer, a cyclist, becoming an explorer, an expedition leader, or a scientist and researcher, whether you're interested in travel, whether you've got a specific focus, whether you're a mother and dealing with pregnancy, or you're wanting to get into thru-hiking or mountaineering. There are hundreds of episodes linked into these different areas. So please do go check it out. Develop your own playlist. Take notes. Figure out what's going to work for you. Be like a bit like I was going to say pigeon. I think I mean pigeon. Pick and choose what tips and tricks are going to work for you. Not every tip and trick is going to work for you and your life, because obviously we're all individuals. We've got different situations going on, whether that's childcare, elderly care, jobs, study, illness, health, etc. But there might be one thing that will work for you. And the only way you're going to know if it's going to work for you is by actually doing it. So I do encourage you to be proactive. I do encourage you to start. I do encourage you to take action. I encourage you to do the work. Thank you so much for listening to the Tough Girl Podcast. If you want to support the work that I do, then please do visit Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast, and you can sign up as a monthly or annual patron. I am active on Instagram at Tough Girl Challenges. It also goes out on Facebook as well. But all that's left for me to say is, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.